What's going on, Summoners? Welcome back to another ProGuides video. I'm Kangas, and today we're talking about 5 sleeper OP picks and builds that you should be abusing for some free LP. You definitely know the popular OP picks and builds since they're all over social media, including our own YouTube channel. But today, we're looking at some of the lesser known builds. So hit that sub button, and let's get into it. The first build we'll talk about today is for the toxic top laner, Singed. Generally, the most popular mythics on Singed are Turbo Chemtang for added engage, allowing him to quickly close in on a target to flip back to his team, or the more damage-oriented build, Liandry's Anguish and Riftmaker, for the synergy with his poison and for some big damage over time in those extended fights. All 3 options are definitely strong when you either need that extra engage power or damage output. But an often slept on mythic that only the real Singed mains have been abusing is Imperial Mandate. Instead of looking for a mythic that enables only Singed himself, Imperial Mandate gives Singed a way to enable his entire team. And also the movement speed from the proc also does help him even further too. Imperial Mandate may primarily be a support item, but has had a pretty decent amount of bleeding over to other roles since it was first introduced in the preseason. Aurelion Sol and Azir have definitely abused it mid, and Ashe has even built it even when playing as a carry. Plenty of other mythics have had the same thing happen. Duskblade and Eclipse were the most viable mythics on AD carries for most of the season after all, and Sunfire Aegis and Frostfire Gauntlet were heavily favored by several bruisers. Also, Moonstone Renewer is still just OP, and it was even being built on Twitch. And that brings us to today's question of the day. What's your secret OP build that you never see anyone else use? All of these weird yet efficient builds started with a light bulb going off in someone's head, whether it was a pro player, popular streamer, or just some random in solo queue. And that's exactly why we want to hear what you guys have to say. My go-to right now is Lethality Ability Haste Jinx. With Ultimate Hunter, you get that rocket on a 40-second cooldown, and that thing hurts. But let me know yours in the comments below. Back to Singed though, since his W has a long cooldown and small AoE, and the E only affects a single target, you'll of course be building Riley's Crystal Scepter as your first item. This gives you a way to proc Imperial Mandate on the entire enemy team as you run circles around them with your poison in fights. After Riley's, grab Boots. Singed is one champ where boot choice is super fluid depending on the game. You can get Steel Caps, Merc Treads, Swifties, and even Sork Shoes as they're all viable, depending on what you need more in your game. And then next up, you'll pick up your Mandate. Now with your boots and 2-item core done, the rest of your build is dependent on what you need based on the game. Deadman's Plate, Demonic Embrace, and Morellonomicon are all your standard cookie-cutter options. Deadman's movement speed helps you get into fights, while also making you beefier as a frontline. Demonic adds further tankiness and also adds a pretty substantial amount of damage. Morellonomicon is simply a good finish item due to how much healing is in the game at the moment, and since you should be tagging pretty much everybody on the enemy team non-stop with your poison, it's a great way to cut on the healing for the entire enemy team. It's important to note those last 2 items are definitely leaning more towards the aggressive side of building, and if you feel like your team has plenty of damage already, or you just need a bit more beefiness to survive diving into the enemy team, there's a few item substitutes. Force of Nature helps with even more movement speed while also helping to deal with magic threats. Thornmail can help give grievous wounds while being a much tankier option, and if the enemy team has multiple auto attack based carries, Frozen Heart can also cut down their damage immensely. And as always, if they're crit heavy, you can pick up a Randuin's. For runes, you want to build Conqueror, Triumph, Tenacity, Taste of Blood, and Ravenous Hunter, with a stat rune being double adaptive force and either armor or magic resist. For our next pick, let's visualize a champ select. Your last picking as a top laner, and the enemy team has Tryndamere top, Graves jungle, Yasuo mid, Samira AD carry, and Karma support. Malphite is the obvious choice here, but he was banned out. While any tank could be helpful here, there's one more champ aside from the Superstone that's literally designed to stack armor and can pretty much assassinate anyone on the enemy team, able to kill them with a single taunt. And that champ is of course, RAMMUS. While RAMMUS is definitely more popular in the jungle, his laning can be incredibly strong under the right conditions. While he can never really deal with ranged champions in a 1v1, when he's against an AD melee champion, his lane opponent will practically never be able to do anything in the matchup. And that's why we have him in this video specifically as a counter pick in certain situations. You'll never want to blind pick him top. I repeat, never blind pick him. But once you do have a good lane matchup, like I said, you're pretty much invincible. Rammus's one area he's lacking in as a laner is that he doesn't really have any wave clear built in, but once you pick up Bommies, that problem is pretty much solved. For items, you'll start off building into the trifecta of Bommy Cinder, Bramble Vest, and Plated Steel Cap. This is an extremely cheap anti-AD tank starter pack. It gives you early wave clear, tons of damage for trading, and leaves your opponent unable to deal any significant damage to you. You'll then upgrade Bommies into Sunfire Aegis and Bramble into Thornmail. This just further increases your trading potential and gets you to the point of the game that if you taunt a squishy champion with high attack speed, aka most AD carries, you can pretty much kill them from 100 to 0. You want to keep stacking up armor, with Dead Man's Plate being your next best item for RAMMUS, helping you not only chase down targets with ease, but also giving you more armor. As always, if you're dealing with crit heavy teams, grab a Randuin's Omen. To finish off your build, you can grab Frozen Heart or Gargoyle's Stoneplate. If the enemy team has an AP threat, the best magic resist option is Abyssal Mask, since it helps your teammates blow up the target that you lock down with your taunt. For runes, you want to go Grasp of the Undying, Demolish, Conditioning, Overgrowth or Unflinching, Triumph, and Legend Alacrity. For stat runes, you'll be bringing attack speed and double armor. Remember, while you're incredibly strong at shutting down AD champs, you're not going to be able to all in and kill them level 1. Focus on picking up as much farm as you can early and trade very briefly around Grasp procs once your opponents overstep. Save forcing trades for later, when you pick up those core items that we were talking about before. And before we go any further with our list, I just want to talk about picking up a ProGuides subscription real quick. Subbing gives you access to all of our courses, unlimited chats with our top tier coaches, and discounted rates if you decide to book a session with one of them. And right now, we're running a great deal, so there's never been a better time. Just use discount code RANKUP2021 for 20% off of your subscription. Now, let's get back to the video. Our third sleeper build is for Aurelia. While Aurelia is a champ that statistically isn't doing so well in solo queue, that comes down to two major factors. First, she's a pretty darn hard champ to pilot. Missing E or queuing the wrong target leaves you immobile and dead in the water. But if you play her properly, you can completely wipe a fight. The second thing that brings her win rate down is people building the wrong items. Trinity Force was core to Aurelia in the past, since she made the most out of every stat and both of its passives. But with the new items, a few players have actually noticed how broken Immortal Shield Bow is on her. While the Omnivamp items and Gore Drinker were hit with pretty big nerfs, Shield Bow is still in a really solid spot, and it works perfectly on her. While Aurelia does like the attack speed from Trinity Force's mythic passive, the extra AD from Shield Bow helps to compensate, while the HP helps buff her up quite a bit. And the really OP part of the item comes from the Lifeline passive. Once you go under 30% HP, the shield from Immortal Shield Bow buys you the time that you need to throw out your ultimate and E on as many targets as you can, with the super increase to your lifesteal allowing you to heal for huge chunks of damage as you dash between targets with your Q. Aurelia Q can't crit, so it may seem like the crit from Shield Bow is a wasted stat, but once we talk about the full build, you'll see that that's not really the case at all. So what exactly is the build? Well, you'll start off by rushing Blade of the Ruined King as your first item. Unlike most champs who get the most out of building their mythic item first, on-hit damage, attack speed, and passive proc from Blade of the Ruined King simply work way too well to not build it first. Then you'll pick up either Merc Treads or Plated Steel Cap, whichever is more appropriate for your matchup or the enemy team comp. After that, you'll pick up your Shield Bow. Next, you'll grab Gwinsu's Rageblade. Aurelia's Q can't crit, but this will convert the crit into on-hit damage, which her Q does apply. Death Stance can be a good mix of offensive and defensive against AD heavy teams, and Spirit Visage helps top off the build by giving magic resist for AP threats, while also beefing up your shields and increasing your ability to heal through your opponent's damage. For runes, you go Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Alacrity, Last Stand, Sudden Impact, and Ravenous Hunter, with your stat runes being attack speed, adaptive force, and either armor or magic resist. UDYR appearing on this list may seem pretty out of place, as he's currently one of the most popular champs in the jungle and even has a 100% presence rate in pro play at the time that this video is being made. But almost all the UDYR players now go Turbo Chem Tank and just build full tank, run Phase Rush, and max Phoenix stance, becoming a nearly impossible to bring down CC bot with moderate magic damage output. This entry is not that build. This one is AD UDYR. When the new items first came out, Stridebreaker is what actually brought UDYR back to life. His incredibly simple kit, being based on 4 different auto attacks, left him massively power crept out of League. He was incredibly easy to kite, so even if he got a lead early, he was pretty much useless in fights. But with Stridebreaker, he was able to gap close and shred targets. Yes, the Chem Tank build became more meta, since being a tank in the jungle generally gives you more consistent team fighting ability, and it's also just easier to pull off. But that's not to say AD UDYR doesn't have a place in League. For the times when your team comp already has plenty of magic damage, or just lacks damage altogether, AD UDYR is still a very strong option. For items, you'll build immediately into Stridebreaker and pick up Plated Steel Caps, Merc Treads, or Boots of Swifties depending on the champs you're dealing with, and after that you're going to build into Blade of the Ruined King. At this point, you'll be able to run down and quickly kill squishy carries just like an assassin, but still have incredible dueling power against bruisers and tanks. Basically, there's very few champions in the game that can deal with AD UDYR in a 1v1 setting. From this point, your build can vary a bit. If you want to keep up the more damage-heavy build, you can get Steric's Gauge, Death Stance, and Spirit Visage or Thornmail. If you want to tank your build to serve as a frontliner in fights, you can opt for Dead Man's Plate, Force of Nature, and then of course Spirit Visage or Thornmail again. For runes, you'll run Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Nimbus Cloak, and Celerity, with your stat runes being attack speed, adaptive force, and armor. And the last build that we have is for Senna. Since her release, players have tried several different builds, with multiple ones being successful trends on both AD carry and support. We've seen crit builds, lethality builds, and even tanky Sennas that Fed Assassins struggle to bring down. That last one is what we're talking about today. With how well Senna could abuse Guinsoo's Rage Blade with her passive, the Kraken Slayer Guinsoo's build was performing too well and too consistently. So naturally, it's been nerfed on patch 11.5, opening up more viable options for her. There's a few things that set this build and playstyle of Senna apart from the standard AD carry Senna that we've been seeing dominate the meta. For one, you'll be playing support or fasting Senna, so you'll have much more souls, and as a result, you'll have more range in teamfights. You'll also be building a much tankier set of items, and running Grasp of the Undying for even more HP. That way, even if there's an opponent that can reach you in the backline, it's pretty unlikely that they can bring you down before your teammates help you deal with them. On top of making you tanky, your items are completely focused on providing utility to your team while hindering your opponents, instead of just dealing damage. So what's the build look like? Since you're playing fasting Senna, you'll start off by purchasing Spectral Sickle, pick up Boots of Swifties, and start building into Frostfire Gauntlet. Since you're running Grasp of the Undying as your keystone, the slow field on your auto attacks from Frostfire make up for not having Glacial Augment. Next up, you'll pick up Black Cleaver to help give some armor shred for the AD champs on your team. The last two slots are dependent on what you need in your game, but the best items in general will be Umbral Glaive for added vision control and a bit of damage, and also Chempunk Chainsword for grievous wounds. While it's generally not the best item on most ranged champions, I do think that Deadman's Plate is also a solid option if you're dealing with a lot of AD assassins jumping on you in the backline. Tank stats make you even harder to kill, and the movement speed can be really nice when it comes to finding better positioning on an immobile champion like Senna. For runes, you'll run Grasp of the Undying, Font of Life, Bone Plating, Revitalize, Presence of Mind, and Legend Alacrity, with the stat runes being double Adaptive Force and Armor. Well, there you have it, you crazy animals. Those were the dirtiest off-meta picks for patch 11.5. Remember to try these out in your normal games before queuing up for ranked, otherwise you're probably just gonna troll your team. But hey, if you enjoyed the video, remember to leave a like and sub to the channel. Also answer our question of the day with the off-meta pick that you like the most in the comments down below. That's it for the video though, so as always, best of luck on the Rift. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.